silence. Then breathing. Wet, labored, wrong. The sound of air being dragged through ruined lungs, filtered through steel. The 25th of November, 1177. You're looking at a boy who can barely close his fingers around leather reins. His hands wrapped in linen bandages that were white at sunrise are now stained dark rust. Beneath them, flesh is dying. In places, bone is beginning to show. Leprosy doesn't just kill you. It erases you, piece by piece, while you're still alive. The silver mask covering his face isn't ceremonial. It's necessary, because what lies underneath would make hardened soldiers look away. 3 miles ahead, the horizon is gone. Not hidden by fog, hidden by men. 26,000 warriors under Saladin. Cavalry stretching so far across the plains that their banners look like a storm swallowing the earth. Green, black, gold. And behind this dying boy, only 500 knights. Exhausted men, exhausted horses, dented armor, broken lances, and odds so brutal, most commanders wouldn't even discuss them. Every advisor told him to stay behind the walls of Jerusalem. Every military mind said the same thing. If he rides out, Hades. Then Baldwin IV of Jerusalem does something no one in that field will ever forget. He gives the order to charge. Jerusalem in 1177 is not the holy city painted in church glass or sung about in pilgrim hymns. It is a kingdom held together by cracked stone, old blood, and the stubborn refusal of men who should have surrendered years ago. The outer walls still stand, but sections are fractured from decades of siege, patched with fresh mortar over older scars. The streets are thinner now. Merchants speak in lower voices. The wealthy had already fled. The poor stayed behind to die where they were born. Those who remain do not speak about victory anymore. They speak about time, how much food is left, how many horses can still fight, how long the wells will last if the siege begins. This is the city Baldwin IV of Jerusalem inherited. Not a throne, not a crown, a slow collapse. At 16, he rules a kingdom most of Europe has already written off. The disease spreading through his body is no secret. His hands tremble when he writes. His joints swell when he stands too long. The numbness in his fingers has already become permanent. In another life, he would have been hidden away in a monastery, remembered only as a sick prince who never ruled. But Baldwin was never given another life. He was given this one. And beyond Jerusalem's walls, something far worse is rising. Saladin is no ordinary enemy. By 1177, he has done what stronger rulers failed to do for generations. He united Egypt and Syria under one command, one treasury, one army, one purpose. Reclaim Jerusalem. His name carries weight from Cairo to Damascus. He is disciplined, patient, respected even by men who wake each morning praying for his death. And as autumn closes over the Holy Land, his banners begin moving west. Entire villages pack their belongings before his scouts even arrive. Not raiding, not probing, advancing. For the first time in years, everyone in Jerusalem understands the same terrifying truth. This time, Saladin isn't coming to threaten the kingdom. This time, he isn't marching toward Jerusalem. He's marching toward its funeral. And inside Jerusalem, panic spreads faster than fire. Scouts ride through the city gates with horses foaming at the mouth, faces gray with dust, voices breaking as they deliver the same report again and again. Saladin is moving faster than expected. Villages along the coast are already burning. Supply roads are disappearing one by one. Farmsteads that fed the kingdom for generations are now smoke on the horizon. Children are being loaded onto carts before the smoke even reaches the city walls. In the royal chamber, the last commanders of Jerusalem gather around maps worn thin by too many wars. The numbers are laid out in silence. The city garrison is exhausted. The treasury is strained. Available cavalry is barely enough to mount a serious defense. Templar reinforcements have already been fighting for weeks along the frontier. No one says the word defeat because no one needs to. It is already sitting in the room. One by one, Baldwin's advisors speak. Negotiate while there is still something left to save. Fall back behind the walls. Preserve the crown. Preserve the bloodline. Preserve whatever can still be preserved. And then one veteran commander, a man who has buried brothers, sons, and friends in this soil, finally says what no one else is willing to say. If we ride out now, we do not come back. No one argues, because everyone knows he is right. Every military mind, every written doctrine, every calculation says the same thing. Against Saladin, open battle is suicide. All eyes turn toward Baldwin IV of Jerusalem. He hasn't moved for several minutes. His hands rest motionless on the arms of his chair, wrapped in fresh linen already spotted with blood. He grips the chair because his legs no longer trust him. When he finally lifts his head, the room goes silent. His voice is barely above a whisper, but no one misses a word. If we stay, Jerusalem dies slowly. He pauses, eyes fixed on the campaign map. If we ride, maybe only we die. No one answers, because in that moment, every man in that chamber understands something terrifying. Their king isn't looking for victory. He's choosing who gets to suffer first. Then Baldwin asks a question no one in that room was prepared to hear. How fast does Saladin move when his army stops fearing attack? Silence. Confused looks. Then realization. Baldwin pushes himself to his feet, joints cracking under his own weight, his body shaking from the effort. Saddle the horses, he says. We don't defend Jerusalem tomorrow. We hunt Saladin tonight. And that was the moment fear changed sides. Within minutes, torches are lit across Jerusalem. Stable doors crash open. Armor that hadn't been worn in months is dragged from wooden racks and thrown across exhausted shoulders. Blacksmiths who thought their war was over are suddenly hammering straps, buckles, horseshoes, anything that might hold for one more ride. Priests stand in the courtyards whispering prayers over men who already look like ghosts. No speeches, no promises of victory. No one in that city is foolish enough to pretend this is anything except what it is, a ride toward almost certain death. And at the center of it all stands Baldwin IV of Jerusalem, or rather, tries to. It takes 2 nights to lift him from his chair. A third fastens the armor across a body that has grown thinner with every passing month. When they slide the gauntlets over his hands, his fingers refuse to close. Leather straps are tightened anyway. Every movement tears at joints already being eaten alive from the inside, but his expression never changes. One of the younger knights turns away. He cannot watch his king being prepared like a wounded man being dressed for burial. Outside the palace, more men keep arriving. Knights Templar veterans, household cavalry, border survivors who rode all day after hearing Baldwin had chosen to march. Before mounting, Baldwin asks for the campaign map one last time. His advisors assume he wants a blessing. Instead, his eyes lock onto one stretch of open ground near Montgisard. Dry plains, broken ravines, narrow choke points, terrain most commanders would avoid. Baldwin studies it in silence, then smiles. And suddenly, the men around him understand something far more dangerous than courage. Their king isn't marching to survive. He's marching because he already knows where Saladin will break. By midnight, nearly 500 knights sit in silence, mounted and waiting, looking less like soldiers, and more like men attending their own execution. Just before dawn, they lift him onto his warhorse. He cannot mount without help. He cannot grip with his legs. They strap him to the saddle like a body being carried to its own funeral. And as the gates of Jerusalem open, one knight whispers the thought none of them can escape. If this boy is willing to die smiling, what excuse do the rest of us have? No trumpets, no cheers, just iron, prayer, and the sound of 500 men riding toward history. And by sunrise, the hunt was over. Now came the killing. Across the plains near Montgisard, dust hangs low over the earth like smoke after a fire. In the distance, the army of Saladin stretches across the horizon. Cavalry, banners, supply trains, thousands of men moving with the confidence of soldiers who believe the war is already won. Fires from breakfast still burn. Horses are being watered. Armor lies half-buckled. For 3 days, no one has challenged them. Why would anyone? They outnumber every force in the kingdom. Their commanders are relaxed. Their scouts are careless. And that is exactly what Baldwin IV of Jerusalem was counting on. The first warning reaches Saladin just after dawn. A rider arrives breathless, horse foaming, words breaking between gasps. Crusader banners. Northridge. Hundreds. Maybe more. Saladin barely looks up at first. "A patrol," he says. "They'll retreat when they see our numbers." But when he finally climbs the ridge and looks toward the rising sun, his expression changes. Because standing against that light, surrounded by armored riders and white cloaks marked with red crosses, is a figure no one expected to see. A dying king who should have been hiding behind stone walls. One of Saladin's officers stares at the silver-faced rider in silence before whispering the words no one in that army wants to hear. The Leper King. In that moment, something invisible moves through 26,000 men. Not confusion, not disbelief. Something far more dangerous. Fear. Baldwin raises his bandaged hand. It shouldn't be possible. His fingers barely work. His joints are failing. But somehow that hand rises high enough for every knight behind him to see. Then it drops, and 500 war horses explode forward at full charge. At 400 yards, Muslim archers scramble into position. At 300, arrows darken the morning sky. Knights are ripped from their saddles. Horses crash into the dirt, screaming. The charge never slows. At 200 yards, Saladin is shouting orders, trying to reform his center before the lines can collapse. Too late, because what's charging toward him isn't just cavalry anymore. It's exhaustion, faith, terror, and a king who no longer remembers how to fear death. At 100 yards, Baldwin draws his sword. The blade is strapped to his wrist. He shouldn't be able to lift it, but he does. And when 500 knights see their dying king raise steel against the sun, they stop fighting like soldiers and start fighting like men who no longer care which side of death they end up on. And then the battlefield stops pretending this is a controlled war. It becomes collapse. At Battle of Montgisard, the center of Saladin's army finally fractures under pressure it was never fully prepared to absorb. What began as confident formations becomes broken pockets of resistance, each one swallowed as the charge rolls through. Commanders try to rally men who can no longer hear orders over the noise of panic and steel. Standards are raised, then disappear. Riders attempt to regroup on the flanks, only to find the terrain itself working against them. Ravines turning retreat into trap, distance turning cohesion into chaos. And through it all, the white crosses keep coming. Not fast anymore, not clean, just relentless. A knight rides past a banner still standing, then watches it fall without anyone left to hold it. On the other side of the line, Baldwin IV of Jerusalem is no longer leading a charge in any traditional sense. He is being carried forward by it. His body is strapped to the saddle, but the army around him no longer moves like men obeying a king. They move like something that has lost the ability to stop. Every break in Saladin's formation becomes an opening. Every opening becomes a collapse. The battlefield stops being a single fight and becomes dozens of smaller endings happening at once. Horses without riders, riders without direction. Men stop recognizing which side they are fighting for. Then, something changes in the center. Saladin's elite units, the core that was supposed to hold no matter what, begin to give ground. Slowly at first, then all at once. The line that was meant to be unbreakable bends and breaks. Once it breaks, it doesn't recover, it scatters. And when it scatters, the entire illusion of control disappears with it. What follows is not pursuit, it is destruction. Horses without riders, riders without direction. Officers shouting into nothing. And the realization spreading through the Ayyubid ranks that this is not a tactical setback, it is a rout. Saladin is forced to withdraw from the field with what remains of his personal guard, not as a commander regrouping, but as a ruler surviving. Behind him, the battlefield is no longer an army. It is the aftermath of an army. By late afternoon, The plain near Montgisard is unrecognizable. What was meant to be a decisive expansion becomes a scattered withdrawal under pressure, with thousands left behind in chaos, and the rest breaking away in every direction that offers distance from the white crosses. When silence finally returns, it does not feel like peace. It feels like shock, the kind that comes after reality refuses to behave according to expectation. Baldwin IV of Jerusalem is pulled down from his horse hours later. His armor is cracked. His body is barely responsive. The straps that held him in place are soaked and torn. No one speaks at first. Not because there is nothing to say, but because no one can reconcile what just happened with what should have been possible. 500 knights did not just survive. They broke an army that outnumbered them many times over. And in the quiet that follows, one truth settles over the field. It was won by a king who should not have been able to stand long enough to lose. When the last sound of steel fades and the dust finally settles over the plains of Battle of Montgisard, there is no celebration at first, only silence. The kind of silence that arrives when an entire army realizes what it has just survived and what it was never supposed to survive. Saladin is gone from the field. His force is broken and scattered, leaving behind a battlefield that no longer matches any calculation of numbers, logic, or expectation. And at the center of it all, carried back through the gates of Jerusalem, is Baldwin IV of Jerusalem, a king who should not have been there, a body that should not have been moving, a will that refused every rule history tries to impose on men like him. In the days that follow, messengers will arrive from every direction, repeating the same impossible report. A force outnumbered beyond reason did not simply resist, it shattered one of the most disciplined armies of the age. Chroniclers will argue for generations over how much of it was strategy, how much was chaos, and how much was something they cannot name without sounding like they are abandoning reason itself. But inside Jerusalem, there is no debate. There is only the memory of a boy strapped to a horse, riding forward as if pain had no authority over him, and men who followed because, for one brief moment, fear seemed to belong to the other side. The truth of Montgisard is not that 500 knights defeated thousands. It is that, for a few hours, the normal rules of survival stopped working, and when they resumed, the world had already changed. History will later try to explain it in numbers, in tactics, in supply lines and terrain. But none of those explanations reach the core of what happened there, because what held the line was not strength, and what broke it was not weakness. It was refusal, and sometimes, refusal is enough to bend an entire army away from its own future.